This programme was produced at and first aired on MPR, Manawatu People's Radio, with support from New Zealand On Air. Ka pai Irarangi Tamotu, MPR.
Kia ora and welcome to Reserved Recommendations. This is a show about great trash, difficult art, and our complicated relationships with art and culture. My name's Hugh, I'm the host of the show, and I'd like to take this opportunity to put in a very mild content warning for the show as a whole. Sometimes our recommendations on this show are reserved just because the thing that we're discussing is in some way not good, but sometimes there are aspects of the art or artist that may be confronting for some people. Check the episode descriptions for more information, and do be aware of your listening environment. This evening, I am joined by Derrick Sims. Good evening, Derrick. How's it going?
Hey, Hugh. I'm good, thanks.
Good. A glimpse behind the curtain. Derrick's just come off being interviewed by another program maker here at NPR, and so he is perhaps slightly cooked, but we'll get there.
It's all good, man. We're good.
So thank you very much for coming. You said before we hit record that this has been a long time in the making. This has been a sort of, it's like phone tag, but it's like, are you in the same city at the same time tag, to get together and do this episode. And what we're talking about tonight is the movie. We must be clear to be distinct, because I haven't actually read the book, which is apparently structurally quite different in some ways that have some effects, but we're talking about the movie Cloud Atlas, which is a 2012 movie by one of the Wachowskis.
Both of them.
Both of them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm misreading the Wikipedia article, which I got up on the screen so that I'd remember when the movie was made. And so it's a Wachowskis movie with the assistance of someone called Tom Tykwer, who I'm not quite so familiar with.
Oh, well, let me tell you about him.
Cool.
No, I'm a huge fan of Tom Tykwer, and once I tell you a couple of his movies, you'll know him.
Right.
Run, Lola, Run.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so German director did Run, Lola, Run. And that's where I discovered him. He also did a film called Princess and the Warrior. Don't know if you know that one.
That's no.
Okay. But Perfume, The Story of a Murderer, which is one of my top 10 of all time movies. And that's when I fell in love with him. I was like, wow, this is just tremendous.
Passing digression. Have you seen the Perfume TV series?
No, is it?
Don't.
Is it based on the same material? Susskind's
It's
book?
like, it's based, so the fundamental concept, I'm going to spoil Perfume, the movie and book, both of which are like, how old now?
I think the book was written in the 80s by Patrick Susskind. The film was in the aughts.
Yeah, my rule is if it's
the
like
noughties.
more than 10 years old, I'm not allowed to feel guilty for spoiling it. Basically, the concept of the book and the movie is that there's a guy who's born with no smell of his own, and he becomes fascinated with scent and becomes an expert perfumer, and then in the course of doing that, he becomes kind of metaphysically drawn to the concept of trying to like distill the essence of people, and ends up murdering women so that he can make them into perfume. It's less gross than that sounds.
Oh, I think it's a beautiful movie, and it's so sensuous, and I mean that in every sense of the word.
The TV series keeps that central conceit of someone like becoming obsessed with the concept of refining scent like that, but it relocates it to like a group of friends in Germany, and it's a sort of more conventional thriller thing, and
sounds awful.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. It's one of these like Netflix had all of the money in the world for a while and just like made stuff, and some of it was hits and some of it was dramatic misses kind of deals.
Something interesting. Stanley Kubrick loved that book. Stanley Kubrick wanted to make that movie. Stanley Kubrick said it could never be made. I
can sort of get the vibe of Stanley Kubrick's Perfume. It would have been a chillier thing, I think, but
he said it couldn't be adapted, so he just gave up on it. And Patrick Susskind, the writer, he said that only Milos Forman, I think it's Milos Forman, or Kubrick is the only two people he would let make it. And so Tom Tykwer, who co-directed Cloud Atlas, tried so hard to get that book. He'd already adapted it, and he said, I want to make this into a movie, and for years and years and years. And finally, Susskind said, okay, I'll give you the rights to do it. He did it, and I think he made a tremendous film that almost no one's ever seen. Yeah, not unlike Cloud Atlas.
Yeah. Which is the thing that we're actually. So I mean, he's got form in terms of doing that. So I guess the first thing to say about Cloud Atlas, and I said this to you before we started recording, is that it cemented an idea that had sort of been going in the back of my head about the Wachowskis, which is that they are filmmakers who only ever do like the biggest swings. I've seen. I haven't gone into the Matrix sequels. Because at the time they seemed superfluous to me, and I understand that perhaps there's some stuff in there, but I just kind of never got around to it. And I haven't seen Speed Racer, but I've watched their movies going back to, what's the Lesbians on the Run movie called?
I don't know. Is this pre-Matrix?
Yeah, they did a movie where there's a woman who's like the trophy wife of a gangster, and she falls for a butch female plumber, and they rob the gangster and go on the run. Bound is what it's called.
Bound. My knowledge of their works begins at The Matrix and goes from there. Yeah.
So it's like, it's a really, think like 90s crime thriller in the like kind of Tarantino vibes, but it's less like kind of glib and pop culture quotey than Tarantino is.
Right.
So it's kind of that sort of thing. And then through The Matrix, and then Jupiter Ascending, and this. I haven't seen Speed Racer, but I get the sense that it's a similar vibe. They seem to hit a project with like full enthusiasm and go all in on it. Yeah. And it either works for you or it doesn't. But Cloud Atlas is just like, again, I could see someone looking at the concept of the book and going, this is unfilmable. But they've taken it on, and it's incredibly ambitious.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I think in terms of ambition in 21st century film, it'd be hard to find something more ambitious than this in every way, like in narrative scope, in filmmaking scope, and did you know it's an independent film? No one would finance it. They raised all the money independently. Once upon a time, Warner Brothers was going to finance it, and they pulled out. They said they would distribute it, but they're not going to finance it. So they raised $140 million of their own, 20 of it coming from the German government. They were just piecemealing millions here and there to create this massive, massive film. And I just find it shocking that, it's not that old. What's it, 11 years ago?
Yeah, so
11 years ago.
Old.
And if people have heard of it, that's about as far as you get. Most people haven't seen it. And the few people who have seen it, typically, I find don't like it.
Yeah. And I mean, there are a couple of reasons. So I guess the elephant in the room with this movie is that one of the incredibly ambitious choices they made. So the book does this thing. I understand. I haven't read it, but it does this thing where all of these different perspectives and characters overlap with each other in a structure where each character is reading the previous in terms of history, because it kind of goes across this enormous time period. Yeah. They are reading the previous characters story, and then they're interrupted before they can finish. And so it has this structure where the narratives are kind of like layers around a central core. Like it starts and finishes with the same one, and then it moves in a step and moves in a step and moves in a step. And the way that the Wachowskis chose to do it is get all of these different characters in different places and time periods and portray them with the same actors, so that you have this sense of like continuity of souls or identities or like archetypal characters or something in all of these different places. But that did mean putting characters in ethnic makeup, which is like, It's a thing which has a long and really unpleasant history.
Well, they've been accused of this stuff. I mean, when you talk about the Wachowskis and you're going to accuse them of things like this, you're like, okay, well, let's step back and have a look at this thing. But yeah, I watched it again last night before, and you have men playing women. Mm-hmm. You have people of one race playing multiple races. You have age too. You have people who play, one character who's, in their 30s, and then in the next sequence, which is a completely different story. It's like 6 different storylines all happening at the same time. And then they play a completely different character, and it's the same actor in an old makeup, but now they're like 80 years old. And so they're 30 in one scene and then 80 in the next one. And it could be such a mess. And I think some people saw it. In fact, if you just sit and watch maybe the first 10 minutes or so, because it's multiple storylines going on, it can be very confusing immediately. And if you don't commit to it and commit all in, I mean, this isn't a movie that you watch in passing. It's not one that you fold clothes and then you go to the toilet and you make a little food and watch it over your shoulder on the TV kind of thing. It's you have to commit to it if you're really going to get it and really enjoy it. And I tell you, my experience of watching it for the first time, I'd rented it from the video store here in town. And it was due back, and I'm like, I'm tired. There's no way I'm going to finish this movie. It's nearly 3 hours long. I said, but I'll catch as much of it as I can. So I started it maybe at 10:30, 11 o'clock, and I had an early start the next morning. 3 hours later, I'm still awake. I've watched the entire film. My mind is blown. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I had to return to the video store. But then I did buy it, a little while later on Blu-ray and watch it again last night. And honestly, I loved it the first time. I loved it just as much, if not more, the second time. And it's so dense. It's almost like reading a novel, really. I mean, I don't know if I wanted to read the novel, but maybe I should, because it feels like a novel, and it's so dense. And every time you watch it, I'm sitting there picking out new things, like, oh my God, that ties into this storyline, and it's not a mystery. It's not like these things have to tie in, to solve a murder or anything like that. You've seen that before. But there was a line in the movie where it talks about eternal recurrence, and I thought, oh, that's the movie. All of these people, and by having the same actor in all 6 different stories, playing sometimes lesser characters, sometimes the main character. It's just kind of, it's not a reincarnation, because they're not their former selves. But there's another line later in the movie that says, do you remember is she a robot? Is she she's a created...
I think the in-universe term for them is fabricants.
Fabricants, right.
Yeah.
And so this is New Seoul, South Korea, circa 2100 or something like that, 80, maybe it's beyond that. But I'm not going to ruin the movie here, but she turns out to be a bit more than the rest of her kind, and she has a quote later on in the movie that says, and this quote is taken down and it's published inside of literature that goes on to become religious text hundreds of years later, right? And she says, our lives are not our own. From womb to tomb, we are bound to others. And I thought, man, it's true. And it's true in life. It's also true inside of this thing, that these little events that are happening in places that people are and things that they do and whatnot, it affects things, hundreds of years later in small ways that no one will ever see the connection. But by doing a film like this and in this style, you can see those connections, and it makes you think, wow, that's pretty remarkable how kind of interconnected we are as people over hundreds of years, not just inside of our family and our inner circles and whatnot. And I thought that was pretty damn moving.
Yeah, no, I think that, I think that's the thing, because I had heard that it was like a notorious kind of a bomb or a thing that was not, well received. And so I went into it slightly skeptically, but like you, I was really taken with it. And I think it's really sincere in the thing that it's trying to get across, which is
very sincere.
and again, like that's another hallmark of the Wachowskis, I think. I don't think I've ever seen a Wachowski thing which is cynical.
Same with Tom Tykwer. Like his work is very, it's very interesting you say that, because I was watching that last night and I was thinking, wow, this movie is so sincere, and we live in such a cynical world of film. And I point a lot to, kind of very popular movies, especially, I mean, the more obvious ones are like Deadpool, but any of the superhero universe, and even like your Mario Brothers and all this sort of stuff, that are coming out. They rely on sort of a very cynical approach. They're laughing at themselves. They're pointing to things in the past, like, hey, you know about this? They're not sincere. They don't take themselves seriously. Whereas this one does. I mean, honestly, in so many ways, you can never make this movie today. And even still, I think, it bombed in 2012. I think it'd be an even bigger bomb in 2023.
Yeah, because I mean, like, one of the things that it expects you to take completely seriously is like, I'm trying to remember what his name is in the segment, but there's a segment where Tom Hanks is playing someone in this sort of far future post-apocalyptic kind of ragged civilization, and they speak this like kind of
the true.
Yeah, like
yeah.
They speak this kind of like degraded patois future English, which it's kind of like a staple of a certain kind of post-apocalyptic sci-fi. But yeah, like you say, the true. It's on its face kind of a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a bit silly.
But the movie is just like, no, this is how these people talk. And
it's not far-fetched. I mean, it's like, this could actually be how it is. It just seems a bit silly, yeah. But silly's okay, right?
Yeah, well, exactly.
And any film, I mean, you have to buy into that. Anyway, it's silly for a human being or a alien from whatever planet, that looks like a human, to fly through the air and shoot laser beams out of his eyes, But you believe that? It's like, it's okay, a alternate version of English in the future, if you find that laughable, I mean, a man flying in tights with laser eyes. I mean,
I mean, I guess, like, you mentioned superheroes already, but like,
sorry, that's low hanging fruit.
I mean, but it's fair, because I think one of the things that there are kind of two simultaneous strands in the superhero movies, both of which I think are a poison to the kind of filmmaking that the Wachowskis are doing here. One is the kind of winking Marvel thing about, isn't this silly? Aren't we goofy with what we're doing? And the other is like the route that DC decided to go off the back of Christopher Nolan hitting it big with The Dark Knight, which is to go, no, this is very serious indeed, and serious in a very painful and aggressive way, and like the twin urges that people either like. You either have to laugh with people at the silly thing that you're doing, or you have to do the thing which is silly and is a book about a man in tights created explicitly for children, with like very, very simple morality. And we must treat this deadly seriously as high art, which there's nothing ridiculous about this at all. Both of those are kind of a poison to a movie like this, because you can't go like, this is everything about this must be as grounded as possible, and yet have the all of the parallel stories all happening at once, and the far future stuff, and it kind of genre shifts as it moves as well.
It's every genre, really. I mean, there's a lot of science fiction in there. There's obvious drama. I would say it's a dramatic film, in general. But yeah, it's a complete genre mashup. There's a mystery. There's mystery going on, you know.
And it's like when it's doing its 70s mystery, like it's
which is a great sequence. It's really good.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
But it's doing like 70s mystery movies,
and it feels like a 1970s. Yeah, like a almost like a. You could almost see Steve McQueen and or what's her name? Old Love Story character. You know, it's like it's not like The Getaway, but. Yeah, you could see this as a 1970s film, and I think it takes place. Is it in San Francisco? They didn't shoot there, but it's like
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it almost feels like it's ripped from The Bullet and Dirty Harry, kind of pages. But it's so many things, and then you have this like 1930s love story / drama about a musician who. Teams up with Ben Whishaw, who, by the way, was the lead in Perfume, and Tom Tykwer directed that sequence inside of Cloud Atlas. But Ben Whishaw plays a musician, a great musician, who wants to work underneath kind of a has-been but once great musician who just destroys him, in his life. And so it's a romance love story that ends in, I'm not ruining this, it's the second scene of the movie, it ends in suicide, and it's so heartbreaking, and so you feel for these characters growing up in a time where a relationship like they had is illegal, and then you have also there's like a Nazi Germany's going on in the background, but it doesn't even focus on that. It's just like a one-off line, like, oh, are you ignoring what's going on in Germany right now? And if you miss it, it doesn't matter, and anyway, it's so many movies. in one, and then there's the new soul that's very Wachowski kind of futurist, flying cars and replicants or whatever you call them. And
like borrows, it's live action, but when I was watching it, the kind of chase and fight sequences felt like they borrowed a lot from anime.
Yeah,
like there's a lot of.
I think a lot of their stuff does, doesn't it? Like the action sequences. I think
they're probably big anime fans, but like the way that it's. The way that the action's presented felt like that to me.
But then you have the sequence that's way in the future that feels like it's like a primal past that blends kind of almost Star Trek-like science fiction, but with this brutal, very violent, it almost feels like a Native America with Tom Hanks plays this. And he and his family plays kind of, I don't know, they nomads or something. They're not nomads. They have huts or whatever. But then there's horse people, and Hugh Grant's this awful, very painted, kind of skeletal baddie who's killing them all on horseback. It almost feels like something from 2,000 years ago, but it's actually 100, or no, more than that. It's like 400 or 500 years in the future. It's all of this in one, which makes you think, how do you market that?
Well, exactly. And I mean, if you look at the poster, the way they tried to market it is by putting Tom Hanks's head on there real big.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it is not a Tom Hanks movie. It is a movie that coincidentally has a Tom Hanks in it.
And he's responsible for the movie being made entirely, because no one would, they like I said, they had a hard time getting the money. But and I've saw an interview with Tom Hanks after this. Tom Hanks has said this is his favorite, most watchable movie that he's ever made. For him, it's the only one he's seen more than twice. And in another interview, he said that there was once a version that was over 4 hours long, and he said it was just remarkable. And I mean, I'm like, oh God, a 4-hour movie. I mean, at 3 hours, you don't really get bored. I mean, it's fascinating. It's captivating. The form, too, of cutting back and forth between these stories with no rhyme or reason. Sometimes it just like cuts out of one and straight into the other one, and sometimes it's a bit more graceful. But yeah, it's remarkable, like the form as well.
It's interesting that we were kind of talking about the 70s with regard to like the kind of cop detective segment, because the thing that it reminds me most of is like the again, very ambitious, and often because it was the 70s, so the special effects are not all that. They come off these days as sort of quaint, but like the very like aiming for philosophical weight, kind of 70s sci-fi, like Logan's Run. If you want like bad movies to watch on purpose, Zardoz. But like this like big, just almost like a wow man science fiction about like, just these kind of massive concepts that were often made in like the late 60s and 70s. That feels like the kind of filmmaking, but with like modern tools, if you like.
Back to Tom Hanks. He's I thought while watching it this time, I was like, this is the most not Tom Hanks I think I've ever seen him. And granted, it's because he's playing multiple roles. Some of them,
Villainous.
Some of them villainous. What's interesting is that he, if you think about it, this is the first time I've thought about the movie this way, but if you took in each character chronologically, it's interesting how Tom Hanks goes from villainous to, a villain till, okay, he's working for a villainous company, but he's kind of the good guy inside the company. And then by the end, he becomes a good guy. But then at the very end, way off into the future, he's a good guy, but he's tormented by this Hugo Weaving, that weird character that he plays with the hat
sort of
that's
like
a jester.
Evil demon
Yeah, it's
thing.
weird. It's so strange. That's a goofy thing too. It's like when you see it, you're like, this is a little bit goofy every time, but by the end of it, it kind of works. And but if you take Tom Hanks's character in that sort of arc of awful, trying to be good, and he gets here to the end, and he is good and trying to do good, but there's still this awful demon, literally, over his shoulder all the time. I think that's a fascinating way to look at it, and I think it's honestly maybe his best performance. Take and pick whichever one, but across the board, he's quite good in this movie. It might be my favorite Tom Hanks movie.
And like
well, I don't know about that.
We mentioned the racial makeup, but as well as the racial makeup, there is also some like pretty aggressive like facial prostheses and things that he's having to act through on his way through it.
In the old story when he has the teeth, he looks so awful in that. Yeah. Well, did you see the Elvis movie?
I have not seen the Elvis movie.
Well, he's got quite a lot going on there too, and that's an interesting performance. But still, I think Cloud Atlas might be Tom Hanks' best. If you want to see a great performance, it's probably his best one. But there is a lot of facial prosthetics, and some of them are what people complained about. Switching races of people, via these prosthetics. But I think it actually plays into the movie in this sort of idea of whatever I said, eternal recurrence or whatever, by having the same people. And it's kind of interesting. Sometimes you don't even realize that that's the same person that's been in all these other stories. That character, what'd you call her, Fabricant?
Yeah.
She's in almost every story, and you don't realize it. Did you know that she's the Mexican lady?
Yeah, I think I did.
In the detective story?
Yeah.
I didn't know that until after I watched it last night, and I was like, oh, what all roles was she? Because I knew a few of them. And I was like, oh my God, what a great makeup job. I had no idea that was her. Everybody plays heaps of roles, and sometimes they're completely unnoticeable. Like you see Halle Berry as a man in the future, and you're like, I have no idea I thought that was men. It's fascinating. I think it's one of the boldest. I don't want to call it a swing and a miss because I don't think it's a miss. I think it's a swing and a hit. But a lot of people just didn't get it, and I don't know if they could get it. It's a commitment.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. So we're at around about the halfway point. We will continue this conversation right after this.
Support this show and others like it by giving a donation. For more information, go to www.mpr.nz/donate.
Welcome back. You're listening to Reserved Recommendations. This is a radio show and podcast about great trash and difficult art. I'm talking to Derrick Sims about the movie Cloud Atlas. And you said a thing about like, you consider this a swing and a hit, but a lot of people didn't get it. And I do think that I wonder if the Wachowskis are in some ways like victims of their own success with this, in that like the thing that they're most famous for is a bit of a wow man movie. Like The Matrix is like, have you ever considered that everything's not real? Wow, man. But it's also like a really straightforward action blockbuster with some really nifty effects. And I think like if you want an action blockbuster from the era where it came out, like it's amazing. It's really good. But I think I wonder if that kind of set a template for what people were expecting from them some ways.
No doubt. And I think you talking about the Matrix sequels kind of had the same kind of fallout. You know, giant spectacles, big ideas, whatnot, didn't really sit well with critics or with the audiences and stuff. Me personally, I like them a lot.
Well, so
I didn't see the fourth one, but I really like the second and third one. But you're right, like they created something that was not only interesting and kind of knocked it out of the park, but it was so sensational and big and industry changing, really, that no matter what they do after that, it's going to be compared to The Matrix. And even this one, you know, I bet at the top of the poster it would say, from the creators of The Matrix.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, oh, but this isn't The Matrix. And so if you go into it thinking that Cloud Atlas is going to be The Matrix, and in the second scene, you're in 1930s Europe, you know, with a guy talking about his lover and how everything's falling apart, and he wants to just write the best symphony ever. It's like, wait a minute, this isn't The Matrix at all, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, similarly, I haven't seen them, but I get the sense that the Matrix sequels were also not the Matrix. Like, it's like you, on the strength of Star Wars, you go and see Return of the Jedi, and instead it's like a discussion on the ethics of the Jedi Order. And there's no lightsaber fights.
Yeah,
you know, like,
well, I think they still delivered in the second and third Matrix. They still delivered the big action set pieces. But all the in between, I mean, they leaned really hard into the philosophy, you know, and I think most people were just like, just give us the guns and the flips and the bullet time. That's all we want, you know. Which the first one was a nice balance of that, but I think I like the flashy stuff. I love the Agent Smith fight in the rain in slow motion. It's all great. But I also like the other stuff. In fact, I like the other stuff more and the ideas. And that's something else too. This movie and the Matrix movies, especially the second, third one, even the first one, are just so full of ideas. And you don't see that very often now, especially in a blockbuster. Not in a $100 million movie. You don't see many ideas. You see nice, perfectly wrapped, you know, gifts where you know the beginning and the end. You're safe inside this box kind of thing. That's what we're used to seeing now. And you're not safe with the Wachowskis, you know?
Well, no, and I guess that's what I meant by saying it felt like a throwback to an earlier age of filmmaking, right?
Like the 70s, yeah.
Yeah, is that, you know, like you would get these movies where someone had an incredible passion and 500 ideas at once and tried to do all of them. And what you get at the end is a movie that's like a real experience, but also in some ways kind of unwieldy. And so you have to be prepared for like the 3-hour runtime or the fact that it's gonna like get lost in a little I had a previous episode where I talked about a Jodorowsky movie and like
which one?
It was The Holy Mountain.
Oh yeah.
And The Holy Mountain does things where like there'll be a story going along and then it'll get lost in a little 5-minute digression where it gives you the entire history of South America as a little play with lizards dressed up as in armor in the middle of a circus. And then it goes on with the rest of the movie. Yeah. And it's like...
But he is bonkers. Jodorowsky.
Yeah, he's mad. And the Wachowskis are not
Nothing's
quite
traditional
that mad,
narrative about
think.
him. Yeah.
But it does like it feels like that they're trying to have all of these ideas at once in some ways.
Well, I wish people would give this one a try and don't read anything about it. Don't listen to anybody. Just commit to runtime, whatever, 160 minutes or something. Just commit to it. Sit down and give it a watch because I was looking last night after watching the movie. I said. I wonder how well it did, like, critically, and it was almost a 50-50 split. Some critics, including Roger Ebert, who is my favorite critic, and I used to read all of his stuff, said, in fact, I would like to quote him because I thought what he said about it was just tremendous. He said, Gave it 4 out of 4 stars, calling it one of the best films one of the best films of the year, one of the most ambitious films ever made. Even as I was watching Cloud Atlas the first time, I knew I had to see it again. And then I saw it a second time, and I knew I needed to see it a third time. I think if you want to see something daring and visionary, this is the kind of thing you go to. I was never, ever bored. On my second viewing, I gave up any attempt to try to make logical connections between these characters and whatnot. They just let it consume him. And and I thought, man, that's great. And Roger Ebert's wonderful. At the same time, The Village Voice and Time Magazine called it the worst film of the year. Oh, that's great. Time Magazine called it the worst film. But yeah, I was reading some reviews of it because I've seen it twice, and I feel like if you haven't seen it before, don't read anything about it. Just experience it.
And I guess we are making it sound like it's quite high-minded, but I think the other thing about it is that you can just kind of let it carry you along, because while it does try and say a lot of things at once, eternal recurrence, it says them all several times in several different ways.
Well, I think it's kind of like The Matrix Part 1. It's quite a heady movie, but you can also just enjoy it and get the full story and enjoy the movie and miss 75% of what they're saying, on a philosophical or on any sort of deeper level. You just take it at face value and all right, interesting. But then again, if you watch it again and again and again, man, I mean, the onion is just dense,
Yeah, no, I mean, there are all of these things where segments refer to other segments, or characters mimic other characters' gestures, or they say that things that other people in other periods have said or are going to say in the future, again, with a slightly different emphasis, and all that stuff. But like the core is kind of like throughout history, kindness is good and oppression is bad, and even if you aren't able to overcome oppression yourself in your own moment, you can sow the seeds for something better the next time the same struggle arises, sort of.
Well, that's a sort of reincarnation kind of thing, to a point, whether it's yourself or society breaking down and rebuilding on top of the successes and failures of previous societies. I think that's explored in there. There's just so much. It's so damn dense. And I honestly, I genuinely think I could watch it again tonight and enjoy it just as much as I did 2 nights ago. Maybe I didn't bring it with me, but I genuinely think that it's just a tremendous movie. And I had a temptation, because I have it on Blu-ray, I had a temptation to watch like special features on it. But I said, you know what? I don't want to. And I've actually felt like I read a couple of reviews of it. I'm like, okay, I'm done. I feel the movie, even if you know so much about it, definitely if you don't, but it has a mystery to it. And that's something I find quite intriguing about it. It reminded me of watching 2001 for the first time.
Yeah, I could see that.
Where, I mean, it's huge in scale, it's huge in scope. 2001 is a bit more opaque, I think, than Cloud Atlas. But you're watching Cloud Atlas and you're like, okay, maybe I don't understand all of this, but man, it's really fascinating. Maybe I should give it another chance. Kind of like what Roger Ebert was saying. I need to see it again. And I think that it's great that it has mystery. And it's okay if you can't answer every question. I feel like you're talking about the DC Marvel thing. It's also nicely packaged. There's never any questions. There's never any stakes. There's never any mystery, really.
No, and
that won't be solved by the end.
No, and in contrast to the kind of 70s thing that I was comparing it to, like, and I would kind of put 2001 in with this as well. Like, one of the things that those 70s guys would do is they would just kind of have long stretches where nothing in particular happens. And that can make things kind of a slog, because if you're in the headspace of modern movies, it feels like nothing's happening. Yeah. But there's always stuff happening in Cloud Atlas. There's never any of those periods where you just sit and watch a guy sit in a cave for 10 minutes.
Yeah. No, it's quite a fast-moving, lots of action and stuff like that. It's very well paced for such a long movie. Some might say better paced than 2001, even though I love 2001. I feel too that a lot of, and this has been going on for 40 years now, but the sort of deterioration of attention spans in the media, and I've tried to with my own kids push against that and say, nope, you're not allowed to say you're bored. You're going to sit there and you're going to take in what this person is giving you, and you're going to listen, you're going to pay attention, and then in the end, if you don't like it, well, you don't have to watch it again, but you're never going to say you're bored. And I find that too with, I have friends who won't watch movies. They said, I can't sit there for 90 minutes and watch a movie. I can't sit there for 2 hours. Then again, the same friends can binge watch 10 hours of whatever television program, in a day, But too, that's something else too, like packaging up these little 45-minute kind of with a cliffhanger at the end of everything, and then people can watch, many more of those. But I wish that we had a bit more of a change of heart when it came to movies in general, especially movies. But a change of heart is like, you know what, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to see what this artist has to say. And I might get bored. I'm going to turn my phone off, though. I'm just going to sit here and live inside this moment, And I feel like if you do that, this movie is very rewarding. And the more you do that, you watch it again, it's a gift that keeps on giving, if you will.
It is. It is. And as we've been saying, like, at the same time, not short on spectacle, the Wachowskis are always stylish as well as whatever else they're doing.
Oh, their photography is just wonderful. And John Toll shot this movie. He's a tremendous photographer. He shot Terrence Malick's Thin Red Line. He's wonderful. And I think photographically this movie's just tremendous, as is The Matrix. Everything they do, you can almost see the storyboards. Like, wow, they've really planned this thing out,
Yeah, which I guess is one of the things that makes me, that kind of cements the like comics and anime connection, is that, a real eye for kind of a panel shot,
Mm-hmm. I know they're fans of anime. I've listened to a radio show with some filmmakers that talked about working with them early on, and almost all of their storyboards were based off of some anime. Yeah, and I'm not a fan of anime, but I quite like their style and how they execute it inside their movies.
If you ever had an interest in getting into anime, I would suggest it's like year 2000 maybe, or it might be late 90s, Ghost in the Shell.
I own it.
Right.
But
it just didn't connect with you?
I haven't watched it, but I own it. Like, I own it. I saw it like in an op shop, and I'm like, you know what? One of these days I'm going to give it a try, because I knew that was...
Similarly, like, lots of big ideas with your action, and it was kind of, it existed in a historical moment when anime was just starting to break outside of Japan, and so they thought, we're going to throw just a shit ton of money at this movie and make all of the animation, as slick as we possibly can, and so it's incredibly smoothly animated and well produced.
Right. Well, I've seen anime films that I do enjoy. I'm not a huge fan of that genre. But then at the same time, I know, was it Michael B. Jordan in his latest movie, Creed, took a lot of the fight sequences directly from anime, and he was just emulating that. Jordan Peele has done it, and he did it in Nope. In fact, there was a sequence in Nope. Did you watch Nope?
Yes, yeah. I just watched that quite recently. It's a thing.
Yeah, it's a great big spectacle. It's like, wow, that's cool that they financed this movie. But the Akira slide, do you know what I'm talking about? When I saw that, and like again, I've only ever seen Akira once. I thought it was good. Still not a fan of anime, but I saw it. I'm like, that's the Akira slide. I know what you're doing there, man.
Yeah, no, it was the Akira bike too.
It was. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for coming and having this discussion. Are there more things that you want to add about Cloud Atlas before we wrap up?
Yeah, I want to talk about the soundtrack. I just want to mention it is out of this world. Tremendous soundtrack. Tom Tykwer, who was co-director, is also a composer, and he composed the music for Perfume as well. And Perfume and Cloud Atlas have two of my favorite soundtracks ever. And it's cool how this one, the music ties into the movie too. Like, he's writing music, and it just really fits nicely. And yeah, I quite like the music of this movie. Yeah, no, it is a real thing. And
like big soundtracks are kind of a Tom Tykwer thing as well, because I remember that being a big part of Run Lola Run.
Oh, yeah,
although
yeah.
I haven't seen that since it was new.
I don't know if he composed that music. Maybe he did. But it's it's like heavy. Is it techno or it's I don't know if it's techno, but it's very, very heavy percussion.
It's like European techno from the time period.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Well, look, thank you very much. This has been a fascinating conversation. Do you have other recommendations if people like the kind of thing that Cloud Atlas is?
Oh man, are there any more? Is there anything else like Cloud Atlas? No.
No, there's not really.
No, really. I genuinely can't think of anything that. But honestly, 2001 is about the experience of 2001 is similar to the experience of Cloud Atlas, even though they're completely different movies.
Yep. I would agree that. I would agree with that. I would also say like maybe do one of the more approachable 70s Jodorowsky movies, like El Topo has a story at least.
It does.
Or if you want other like malign, in my view, unjustly maligned Wachowski movies, Jupiter Rising is,
which I started, I never finished it.
So Jupiter Rising is not as much of a big ideas movie. It's more of a like come with me on my magic carpet ride movie. Like it felt to me like Jupiter Rising was a lot of ideas that really appealed to the Wachowskis, and they were like, look at all this neat stuff. And if you go with them and go, yeah, that stuff is neat. I wish I had a boyfriend who was a werewolf with rocket roller skates. Cool. Or I can be on board with you wishing you had a boyfriend who was a flying werewolf.
Would you recommend it?
Jupiter Rising?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would not say that it's going to give you big ideas that will turn your head inside out. It's definitely like the story is definitely a just go with it, but it's a really interesting. When we get power fantasies in movies or chosen one fantasies in movies, they're often from a very male perspective. It's like a young boy discovers his destiny. And this is kind of that, but a young woman discovers that she's secretly queen of the universe. And it's got a lot of stuff that I think didn't connect with audiences because they're not used to having that perspective. But I mean, it's definitely like bubblegum and popcorn. It's not, heady and complicated.
Right. Well, maybe I'll try it sometime. I've got a long list of movies to get through.
I'm sure you do. Finally, where can people find you and the things that you do? Because you've done a huge number of things.
Well, I'm mostly just making movies and commercials right now. I'm not doing the cinema thing anymore, and I'm not teaching film anymore.
Right. So, I mean, you had a sizzle reel out for people to look at your work and decide to hire you to make things.
Yeah. So you can just Google me, Derrick Sims. That's Derrick and SIMS. But yeah, if you Google me, I'm on the Google and the YouTube has the reels and whatnot. But yeah, I'm very busy with that stuff now.
Are your movies that you have made available to be watched as well?
You know what? Yeah. So the second feature film that I directed, The Perfect Host: A Southern Gothic Tale, the director's cut is playing at the White Napa Film Festival on the 26th of May.
Right.
At 7:15, I think is when it starts.
Okay. So get over to Wairarapa and do that.
That'll be in Masterton,
feasible.
The Regent in Masterton. Yep. And I'll be there and I'll talk about the movie afterwards. And and then a lot of my other work is available. Amazon Prime has a couple of my movies. You just put my name into Amazon. Trying to think of where else. It's in quite a few places.
Just go look for Derrick Sims. Yeah. He's got 2 R's in his name.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of what it's Tubi. Do you know Tubi?
Vaguely.
Yeah, some of my work's on there. That is available in New Zealand. I don't know. Just
go forth and look. Well, thank you very much, Derrick.
Thanks, man.
You've been listening to Reserved Recommendations, a radio show and podcast from Manawatu People's Radio, Te Reo Irirangi o ngā tangata o Manawatu. The show was produced and presented by me, Hugh Dingwall, and I also composed our theme music. It's called Sack Jazz, and you can find it at wolfboy.bandcamp.com. If you enjoyed this show, why not go ahead and share it with a friend? You can find the last 10 episodes at npr.nz/show/reserved or wherever else you get your podcasts. If you want an episode older than that, try searching for Reserved Recommendations on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at Objective Realty, or you can follow the show on Facebook. And finally, Manawatu People's Radio is a non-profit community access station. If you like this or any other piece of their fine audio programming, why not fling them $1 or $2? You can go to npr.nz/donate for more information on how to do that.